Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucks in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Bucks in the Basement, bellying up to the 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. My name's Chris. He's Craig. I screw up a lot when we're trying to put a show together. Like, we tried one take before this show, and I completely just biffed it. And I'm just, like, having one of those, like, months. But my friend Craig is very patient with me, and I appreciate that.
Oh, it's not a problem, man. And I'm going to have to use some of the audio from that other stuff because we had some pretty good back and forth, and I don't know if we can recreate that
I think
again.
I can. I mean, you want to pull it? Do you want me to try to do it again? You want to pull it?
Let's recreate it, man. Let's recreate
it. I'll save you some time. Okay, I'm in love with Trevor May. Like, this is a relief pitcher who just left the Oakland A's, and on the way out the door, after he spends time, he only spent like last year with the A's, so he spent time with the Twins, the Mets, and then last year with the A's. He announces his retirement, and he goes right after John Fisher, the owner of the A's, on the way out the door. He goes on Twitch, and he just starts ripping the dude. Like, here's some of what he said. Sell the team, dude. Let someone who actually takes pride in the things that they own something. There's actually people who give a bleep about the game. Let them do it. Take mommy and daddy's money and go somewhere else, dork.
The dork part is never not funny. Like, he swears like through this entire thing, and then he's just like, dork.
Right. He goes, if you're going to be a greedy bleep, own it. There's nothing weaker than being afraid of cameras. Like, he's going off, but he throws the dork thing in there as well. Like, I love that guy. That every fan out there, if you didn't know who Trevor May was, now you're like, man, I wish I had Trevor May or somebody like him on my team who retired one day and ripped the owner because I don't like my owner, right? Like, I would love to have a Trevor May just go off and defend the fan base like he did. I mean, here's a guy. I mean, look, this is like a journeyman relief pitcher, 34 years old. And on the way out the door, he's like Homer Simpson in that Simpsons cartoon where he drives over the wooden bridge and throws the match up in the air and burns it. And it's spectacular. It's spectacular.
Yeah, and I was telling you before, I went to the Steeler game with my uncle a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about his trip to Vegas, because now that he's retired, he took a trip to Vegas. And if anybody's watched any of the Vegas Raider games, it's like 60%, 70% people traveling there from other teams because it becomes almost like an event, which to me can work in football. But as far as baseball goes, I could see me and my buddies doing like a guys trip out there for like the Pirates' first series. But it's not like we would do that like every single year for 3 games. Number one, our wives would probably divorce us because God knows like the debauchery that we would get into out there with the amount of like drinking. I don't gamble, but I mean, I'm pretty sure a couple of my friends would like lose their houses or something. But I just don't see how that works. And I love the people attacking the owner because I don't know, the Oakland A's kind of like just have a soft spot in my heart from when I was younger, because everybody remembers the series versus what was it, the Giants with the
With the earthquake in
earthquake and stuff like
89.
that, and
Yeah.
89 and everything like that. So for
I know
me, so
exact.
like, and they had the Bash brothers. It was really cool,
Yeah.
even though we found out they were all going to be doing steroids later. But like the A's just are a pretty.
Later. Hold on a second. Later. Pull up a picture of Jose Canseco during that time in the
Yeah,
early
he was
90s.
doing it
And
then.
you
He
tell
was
me
doing
he
it
got on him later. Hey, give me a break.
Maybe
I mean,
Mark
look,
McGuire later.
right, exactly. No, there's I've always had a little bit of an attachment to the A's. I think the A's have just been a team that every generation it seemed like they came along and they had a nice little run. In the 70s, they had a nice little run, right? You got Catfish Hunter with the big mustache. My dad kind of dug the A's, and then you had what they were doing in the 90s where they were just, absolutely on fire and they were good. And even when they were bad here, you still got the Moneyball movie, which is one of the better baseball movies, just because it kind of gives you a little bit of behind the scenes. I mean, I know it's based off a book that was more about stats and they kind of romanticize baseball a little bit, but how do you not get romantic about baseball? But the A's are one of those franchises that I think everybody in the country that's a baseball fan kind of connects to. The thing they don't have is what the Raiders had moving to Vegas. Because you bring that up. I lived on the West Coast for a couple years doing radio. When you're in Reno, Nevada, they're all Raiders fans. When you're up in Sacramento, they're all Raiders fans. Because they were the Oakland Raiders for a long time, right? And then when you go down to L.A., you go to Bakersfield, you go all those areas down up and down the coast there, they're all Raiders fans too because they were down in L.A. They became the state team and really the regional team with the bad boy attitude and the silver and black and the fact that they're basically a nomadic team. And it's not a hard drive to get to Vegas from a lot of those spots that I just mentioned. So to me, that's why they work. They were close enough to their fan base, and their fan base was already used to traveling. The people who were Oakland Raider fans traveled south, and the people that were LA Raider fans traveled north when they were switching back and forth between teams. When you go out to Cali, it's a very different way of rooting for sports. It really is. When I was in SoCal, you would think, okay, fine, they're all just going to be Angels fans or Dodgers fans in LA. They're not fans of anything down there. It's all these other people that aren't actually in LA that are coming in and seeing those games. And that's what the Dodgers do really well because they just culturally work very well in that area. And the Raiders had a very cultural thing. It's a very cultural blue-collar fan base. The uppity people rooted for the 49ers when you were out there, and then the blue-collar team, that was the Raiders when you were out there. And I was out there in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, like, that kind of fan base moves. The A's fan base isn't moving. The A's fan base is the wicked stepchild of that city out there. San Francisco's the big name. If you're an Oakland fan, you're like a Mets fan in New York. You're a White Sox fan in Chicago. You're an Angels fan in Los Angeles. You're not the big one. You're the little brother. And the little brother doesn't have enough fans and isn't going to travel the same way. So I don't think it's going to work for him going to Vegas. And I think that's why Vegas keeps rejecting the deal, because they sit there and they go, we're going to give you all this money in the hopes that you start selling out games here. You don't have the fan base for it. And nobody in the summer wants to sit out in Vegas. I don't care if you make it a dome stadium or not. It's summertime, baby. Would you rather be at the ball game or be at the Bellagio pool looking at the girls in the bikinis? I'm not going to the ball game.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, Chris. It's just a weird thing, and it's good to see. I mean, even if it is just Trevor May, I mean, I should say just Trevor May, because it's not like one of their stars or something. But there's a lot of people sticking up for the Athletics right now, and they definitely do deserve it. And you saw that, the fans showed up. I mean, they weren't showing up because, people weren't putting money towards it. They're selling off the team. They're making trades for the future. And it's like, okay, what's going to happen here? But when they said, okay, let's sell out this team, and they gave the sell the team t-shirts, and they sold out those games. There was people that couldn't even make it into the games. It was like so long to get out there. So I mean, it's just
and their
definitely
their owner's a piece of crap.
He is.
He really did get his money because mom and dad owned the Gap, if I'm not mistaken. And then he was a part owner who looked at the fact that the landscape was changing for places like the Gap and knew he wasn't going to be rich anymore and said, I'm going to buy as many shares as I can to become the full owner because Amazon and all these online things, and you're seeing the malls all die around America. Like, I better move my money someplace else. I don't even think the guy's a baseball fan. I just think he saw a very easy investment where he was already partially invested. He's like, I just need to buy more stocks and I'm going to get into the baseball business. Like, we talk about ownership in Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of bad owners in baseball. There really are. I don't get Bob Nutting, and I'm wondering what your take is on Bob Nutting. I don't get him. Because there is part of me that thinks he's got billions of dollars, he should be spending more money. I really do think that he's cheap. I really think with the revenue sharing, he should be able to increase payroll. I really expect him to do that, and I'm not going to let him off the hook on that. The guy's a billionaire. If you're not going to buy the team and spend a little bit of money on it to win, I got an issue with you. If you can't figure out how to make it work, if you're not enough of a business person to find ways to add income to your team, I'm not saying take your billions and waste it, right? Like, I'm not expecting a billionaire to become a millionaire so I can enjoy a game. Like, I'm not expecting it. But I am looking at a billionaire and saying, you've got a lot of money you can invest. You should be buying up property around the stadium. You should be converting that into more money making for your team. You should be finding ways to increase revenue as much as humanly possible to build up your team and take the revenue sharing and be able to field a competitive team for the fan base. And you won't have to lose your own money. You might have to invest it a little bit, but you might actually get richer out of the whole thing. He just seems to be the kind of guy that I don't even know if he's self-aware about the fact that people think he's a cheap owner. I don't even think he really understands. Like when I listen to him talk, I'm like, this guy actually, he doesn't get what's going on. He just has a team. It could be a lacrosse team for all he cares. He's got a team and he's the owner of it. He doesn't even fully understand the whole thing, and he doesn't really get his fan base or his city that he's in.
Yeah, and like you said, Chris, there are.
I mean, am I wrong about that? Like, what do you think?
No, and I was going to go back and I'll lead up to it. But the first thing is like there are terrible owners in Major League Baseball. We're seeing it with Oakland. We saw the comments that were made, by the Orioles, who, won over 100 games this year from their owner. And with Bob Nutting, I think it is just a lot of not being self-aware of exactly what is he should be doing or what the responsibilities of a Major League Baseball owner are. I mean, he does great stuff like within the community, like his Pittsburgh Charities does, wonders out here with like the food bank and the Miracle League. And he's good in that aspect, but I think that it's almost just like he's like the guy that kind of wants to be cool and isn't cool and doesn't know like baseball, but just kind of he wants to give the reins to somebody that does.
Maybe he
but
can
he's
come
not
on
exactly
the show.
sure who
maybe,
that is.
Maybe we can add Bob Nutting to Bucks in the Basement. Bob, honestly, I don't know you. If that's the case, why don't you come on and we'll teach you how to be cool. Come on and talk about the team with us. I will be completely fair and I won't pick on him. I won't. I mean, how am I going to pick on him? The guy's a billionaire. He's doing more with his life than I am. I'm sitting in a basement talking on a podcast. All right. I mean, like the guy's got the world by, the cojones, and he can do whatever he wants to go and do, and if he doesn't get it, then come connect with the fan base. Come jump on one of these shows, take some questions, start learning about your fan base. Like, be proactive. Like, nobody says you got to be Ebenezer Scrooge and hide inside of your house until the three ghosts visit you, and then you finally throw a couple of coins down to the kid and tell him to go get you the fattened turkey. Like, I mean, you could actually be a billionaire and have time to interact with your fan base and have time to understand what it is that you have. Like, I mean, you're still a human being. In fact, like, that's actually said by Trevor May. He says it right at the end of his comments. He goes, be a human being, for crying out loud. I mean, if you or I ended up all of a sudden with a couple $1 billion, would you stop being around people? Would you stop listening to like sports radio? Would you stop having passion about things? Is that what happens? The life gets sucked out of you? So, I mean, I can't believe that that's the case with every billionaire out there. And I can't believe it's the case with every owner in Major League Baseball. I think they just become so insulated. You go to the stadium, you have this big giant thing, right? You have this big giant thing that's like a palace that you go to where everybody in the place wants to move up within the organization. And this is every sports organization, but especially baseball or even football with these ginormous buildings that they have, right? And that's your building. You got the best office in it. You got this incredible view. Everybody wants to be your buddy because they want to move up from being a low-level front office person to general manager one day. So everybody's kissing your butt. and you're so insulated. I can see how you can get lost in thinking you're actually doing a good job, right? You have so many handlers. You can see how you can get lost. And I'm not excusing him. I'm really not, okay? Because in the end, it's still his life. And you would think that I wouldn't want to be that cut off from people, right? I'd want to be out there. I'd want to understand what was going on. But I think that's one of the problems with ownership across all sports, and especially Major League Baseball. I mean, south side of Chicago, Jerry Reinsdorf is like a recluse. And that team's in complete disarray, and it has been for decades. Like that's a real problem. And look at what happened in Miami. I mean, that's a new ownership group. Kim Ng is out. Look what they did to her. Here's the first female general manager in baseball history. Gets out there for a couple of seasons, builds a team, gets them to the wild card. And that team has a lot ahead of it. She's got 1 year left on her contract, which is an option year. It's a mutual option. And they tell her they're picking it up, but they're going to give her a boss now. They're going to bring in somebody else to be president of baseball operations. They're not going to promote her for a job well done and let her have somebody underneath her, which you would see in most organizations. They're going to put somebody above her. And she did exactly what any strong person with a good head on their shoulders would do. She walked out the door. And she said, no, I'm declining my option, even though all the national media said that the Marlins parted ways with her. They didn't part ways with her. They picked up the option, and she told them to go jump. She parted ways with them. And I guarantee you, like, I know that you're talking about the Huntington thing because it's on your scroll here if you're watching the video, which I don't know. Will the video have my mess up at the beginning? It probably will. You don't edit video, so that's good.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know how to. I'm not smart enough. I mean, I probably can figure it out. But
I say a very choice word at the beginning. So if you ever want to hear me, if you ever want to see me really screw up the video on YouTube, go for it, okay?
If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because of the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucks in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow at Shop Yins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins by a Yinzer.
On the scroll, you're talking about Huntington may get a second chance. Neil Huntington is one of the names in Boston. I don't know how Kim Ng doesn't beat him out because that's somebody who's got a buzz immediately after she walked out of that organization.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear her name in like different places, and I think you hear her name in a lot of different places because people want her to come because she showed, her chops and what she could do in a very short time with a, Marlins organization, which was somewhat in disarray after, what went on with Derek Jeter and everything. So she was a name. I mean, Chris, people can go back and listen to it. That when we were talking about like the short list of people that we actually wanted for the Pirates job, she was somebody who was on the very short list because, I mean, she's somebody that hadn't been given a chance within Major League Baseball, but had shown the ability to, run an organization, to run a scouting department, to do whatever she wanted within Major League Baseball. So I wanted them to jump on that before she, became in high demand. And now she is in high demand. I mean, I saw something with the White Sox, people are saying, should they bring her in? But that's definitely not happening. But
she was with them. She was with them in the early 90s as her first front office position and hasn't been around that team for like 30 years. Yeah. Like there's no connection there. That's just sloppy reporting in my opinion.
Yeah, it's sloppy reporting, but it's also it goes to my point of people. I could see why people would want her. I think that's more of what it's driven out of is people wanting her to come. But yeah, like you said, the whole Boston thing just makes almost like a little bit too much sense for her right now, which is a shame in my eyes, not for Kim Ng, but a shame for me as a Pirates fan who wants to see how Neil Huntington would do with a team with money. because, Ben Cherington was there, so he had a team with money. I mean, won a World Series after becoming, GM for not too long, but you got to see how he would operate with money. Now you're seeing how he would operate, Ben Cherington operates with a lot less money. I kind of want to see how Neil Huntington would operate up there, because him and Ben Cherington are from a similar cloth. It's definitely not the same cloth. They're from the same area. They both are Ingtons, Huntington, Cheringtons, and they also
Really, that's your connection?
no,
They're
but they're
Ingtons?
they're Ingtons. But here's the thing: is, but they're also friends. They're also friends. So,
They're Ingtons. Do they have matching T-shirts that say "I'm with Ington"? Like, what
maybe, I don't know, but I'm just saying they're from the same area.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
I know. I had to go there, but
It's so dumb. I mean, Charrington's better though, right? I mean, am I nuts to think? I mean, like, he hasn't done anything yet, but what he's built and the way that they've done so well in their pro scouting and how they've been able to kind of like get themselves to this precipice, unless they fall flat on their face over the next couple of years, I predict that it'll go down as he was the better GM with not a lot of money, right? So, I mean, I don't know what Huntington's going to do. Now, on the other hand, this Pirates franchise could fall on its face, and then, we'll all be angry in a couple of years. I don't believe it's going to happen, though. So I think what he built here is going to, in the long run, be better than what Neil Huntington was doing.
yeah, and that's where I think people get lost in looking at history right now, because they'll say, well, Huntington did a better job than Cherington. Well, he got the Pirates to the playoffs in like year 6 of his rebuild, or his, whatever.
And that was it. That was the precipice. That
Yeah.
was it. This story hasn't been written yet. And I don't know, man. You look at the talent. I look at what they have right now as their core and what they have in terms of their prospects. And I honestly believe this is not only a playoff team next year, but this is a team that if the owner spends money, and I'm not saying a ridiculous amount, but just, the right amount for what he needs to do at this point. And gets a little bit more business savvy to be able to do it. Like this team could really go on a run of multiple postseason appearances and possibly get into a championship.
Yeah, and I there's no doubt about that. Anybody that hasn't read out there, Ethan Houlihan, who I cite a decent amount with like the payroll and different stuff like that, just put out his yearly article on how much the Pirates spent at the end of the season, and it was right around like $72 million. Like we've talked about before, even if you just go up to 100 million, I mean, that's 28 million more. If you went up to, hopefully maybe we've talked about even like 30 million up, that's still not even like going into the top half of the spending teams in Major League Baseball.
He's not going to be a top half spending team, but he can still be a team that's effective. Like, I mean, look, he can, I don't know where the Rays rank, but I know the Rays are not at the bottom. Like when they're winning, they actually spend a little bit of money. Okay. I mean, there is no such thing as a team that sits in the bottom 5 and consistently makes it into the playoffs. And he's got to eventually open it up. I get why you don't open it up in the bad years. Like in a perfect world, what would happen is, and this is a perfect world, is how it should be run in a front office like the Pirates. There is a balance sheet. There are investors. There is how this whole thing works. And at the end of the year, there is a budget for the next year. And the general manager is told you have a $100 million budget. And if he only spends 70, he gets $30 million put into a fund where the owner can earn a little bit of interest on it, right? But then that money's there when he needs to go over what his budget is. And he's able to save it during the rebuild to go and spend it later on. That's how it should work. I don't know if it does work that way, right? Like you get the impression that billionaires are very much like city councils or like our government in this country, right? Like there is never a surplus that they don't spend immediately or they don't, and they love being in debt. So you wonder whether or not there is ever that reserve money that's set off because you always see this in rebuilds, like they stop spending money. Well, we're going to stop spending money for a couple of years and we're going to get a bunch of prospects and then we're going to raise the payroll back up when we're ready to compete. Well, what happens to that money? You still expect people to walk in the gate. You're still making money off of your TV and radio deals. You're still making money off of your merchandise. It may not be as much, but I guarantee you're not spending as much as you used to. Your profit margin is much bigger those years. So does that money eventually get back into the payroll of the team, or does it go into the pockets of investors? And then our rebuilds essentially ways for investors to make more money and get rich off of the misery of fans who are sitting through a rebuild thinking at some point they're going to spend the money. So that's what I'm always watching at the end of rebuilds for any franchise in any sport. When they elevate things, do they actually dip in and actually go a little bit further coming out of it to get themselves over the hump and make a deal because they had money in their reserves? Or did the owner go jump in the giant vault like Scrooge McDuck and swim in it until he spent it all?
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and that's where, like, I mean, even Pirates fans will go back to the fact that the MLBPA has brought up stuff about the Pirates during certain seasons and had things where they're saying they're not spending enough money. We want to see the checkbooks and stuff like that. They want to see what we can't see. We can't see everything. We can see what the TV revenue comes in. We can see anything that's public, but we can't see exactly how the money is spent. I know a lot of the stuff within that can be spent on minor league facilities. It can be spent on development, which they should be spending on anyway, and something that we've seen the Pirates put more money into since Ben Cherington's been here. But it is very strange that, I mean, you don't know exactly how much money's there, but you have to know that there is some money there, and
There's got to be money. There's
Yeah.
got to be money. You can't look at me and pull out your pockets like you're poor this offseason and in the next few years when you didn't spend a lot over the last couple while you were going through this build. You can't do that. And no fan is going to take it serious. Well, there will be. There's always those crazy diehards that they'll get smacked in the face every day by an organization and still love them and buy tickets, right? Like
Yeah.
there always will be that group, but you're going to have a pretty empty place. And I just don't see that happening. I go back to what I said about what my perception of Bob Nutting is. He may be oblivious to certain things. He may be out of touch. I just don't see him as an evil owner that's sitting up there plotting. Now, he could be. He could be. I don't know the guy. I mean, to become a billionaire, you either get really, really lucky in life or you're really, really cutthroat. I mean, let's be honest. Like, you don't just go out that day. You don't go out at 20 years old, get a job, and all of a sudden become a billionaire. Like, there's some moves you make. There are some people laid the waste along the way to be able to get to that amount of money, right? So I mean, like, I don't know if there is a billionaire out there with a heart, because to get to that point, you did something, right? Like, it wasn't like you just walked in and be like, I'm going to take care of everybody and be the nicest guy possible, and here's a couple $1 billion. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
I think anybody who's a realist knows that.
Yeah, it's definitely not, and that's where, like, I mean, this whole thing goes to is that you have to in turn, like, hire the right people. I mean, obviously with Bob Nutting before, with his hiring, I actually I don't mind anything that Huntington did. I think that he had some shortcomings as far as player development, identification of talent.
Really
Was
screwed up Mitch Keller there
with
at the end of his time.
and
Yeah.
with some of his trades and different stuff, but he also did have some very very good trades. I mean, we wouldn't have Brian Reynolds right now. We wouldn't have O'Neill Cruz in his system if some of his people hadn't identified that. He did do a couple good drafts. I mean, you draft Garrett Cole, you draft Pedro Alvarez for for all of his shortcomings. Was a pretty big important part of the Pirates becoming relevant again. But then, of course, went on a string of drafting like the Cole Tuckers of the world, the Will Craigs, the Kevin Newmans, different stuff like that. But he did get, a Brian Hayes in there at some points in time. We still have Quinn Priester, from his stuff. But for me, like, him hiring, like, Frank Coonley was the bigger mistake. And I think he realizes that now, because he had somebody who was, you know, supposed to be like the business operations, but he was like the president of baseball operations. But he also was like overseeing the GM and was sometimes stepping on, Huntington's toes. And the first thing that he did when he hired, Travis Williams and Ben Cherington this time, said that you guys are going to be completely separate entities. It's not that, Travis isn't going to know how much is going to be spent and he's not going to be part of, the budget making process. But as far as the baseball decisions go, he's going to go, man, I'm a business guy who was
Right.
in hockey before. And here is, Ben Cherington, who's our baseball guy. We're going to leave the baseball decisions to him. If it comes down to any contracts, of course, all these extensions we talk about, that's the other part is Bob Nutting has stepped in with Brian Reynolds twice. He's extended, Brian Hayes. He comes in these types of situations and makes these decisions that are actually, very tough decisions to make, but actually are good decisions for the team. He went out.
Yeah, but he does that so he can save money. Let's be honest. That's what you do. You sit back as the owner with the guy with the purse, and you let them get real close before you step in and save the day, right?
Yeah.
You don't step in before that because it'll cost you more money. That's a tactic is what that is.
Yeah, it definitely is. But then he's also the one. I mean, he wanted to not trade Andrew McCutchen the first time. I mean, he was really having a hard time with that, and that's why he's the one that when he kept in contact with Andrew, they were still, I'm not saying like best friends or anything, but still texted
Pen
back
pals?
and forth.
They were pen pals?
Yeah.
Dear Andrew, dear Kutch, how are you? I'm fine. I went swimming in the vat of money today. I would like to give you some of the vat of money. Will you come back for some money from the vat?
Yeah.
We can go swimming in it together. Your pal Bob.
But here's the thing is, I mean, he, for as much, that's why I think that there's still some hope. And where you say, I don't think he's a bad, I don't know if it's a bad, he's a bad owner. He's been a bad owner at times, but I don't think, but I think he's very oblivious to how bad of an owner he is because he does these certain things that they are good baseball decisions. And they actually, I mean, they end up saving him money, but then he's also having to give out money as well. So, I mean, I don't know, man.
Listen, there are owners that are bad, but there are different levels of bad, right? Okay. The guy in Baltimore, bad owner. Angelos, oh my gosh. Like the way that they talk to their fans, just a terrible owner, right? Jerry Reinsdorf with the White Sox. Insulated a little bit, but still a guy that didn't publicly. He told David Sampson that he always aims to be in second place because that's the carrot that you hold out in front of people. That's a bad owner. That's a guy who's messing with his fan base, right? The guy out in Oakland, bad owner, right? Bob Nutting, bad, but is he bad because he just doesn't get it? And I'm trying not to give an excuse. I'm just saying there's different levels of evil, right? Like on the evil meter, he's not like all the way down evil. He's further back here. Like he's in like a green or yellow setting on his evil meter. On his evil billionaire meter, he's back down here, right? He hasn't gotten all the way up here yet. That's where I put him.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for the guy because if you ever see him dress, he wears like the white old dad sneakers and like the pleated khakis.
Right.
So
that's why
he's not cool.
When I look at him, I think this is just a guy that doesn't get it, man. He just doesn't understand.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say